I'm excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. I have a special guest with me, William Spengler, who's got such an interesting background when it comes to the recruiting space. He is, I don't want to say like has done it all, tried it all, and has been successful in many places. But, right now he's building his own firm. He's the CEO of Frederick Fox, and, he's built out an amazing business model with that team. But Will, just want to start off by saying welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Ben. I really appreciate being on here. So it's good to get some airtime with you.
So before we get started and all the things that I want to talk about with you,
Sure.
How did you even get started in the recruiting space?
Yeah, that's a great question. But so I've been in the recruiting space about 12 years, and I started because I was actually an accountant, and I got my degree in accounting. And when I worked as an accountant through school, I quickly learned that accounting was not for me. And so when I came out of college, I wanted to get into sales. I wanted to control my own income, but I had this really analytical brain. So I actually sold roofing for 2 years. Roofing, I sold solar, I actually sold paper as well. And I did door-to-door sales. And then I got a call from a deco group, and they said, hey, you've got this degree in accounting. You've sold for 2 years. We think you could be a good recruiter. And, I signed on the line, and 12 years later, here I am. So
When you were in college, did you ever even think about a career in recruiting?
I didn't even know it was a real profession, to be honest with you. I remember when I met the recruiter that recruited me, I was shocked that they weren't the employer that was actually hiring me. It was like a recruiter. I thought it was like a scam, to be honest. The guy's name was Brad. I love him to death. I'm still in touch with him, but I was so intrigued by what they were doing, that they were an agent, they were making money. And the guy at the time said, yeah, I'm making like 150 grand a year as a recruiter. And that just blew my mind. I needed to know more about what he was doing. So
that kind of like a similar thing with me. I wanted to become an intelligence analyst. And one of my friends actually worked for the Pentagon, was just like, you're too much of a people person. You'll suck at being an intel analyst.
Yeah.
So met a friend that was a recruiter, and he was just like, yeah, making six figures. And I'm like, wait, you're talking to people all day?
Yeah. How does this go down?
What is this?
who pays you? It's funny. Yeah.
So tell us about Frederick Fox.
Yeah, sure. So Frederick Fox, this is a quick elevator pitch. We're coming up on 20, maybe 21. We have a new guy starting next week, 21 recruiters, and we've got 2 in the back office. The business is on track for about $5 million in revenues this year. We service about 162 customers, and we do 2 main verticals, one being technology. Within technology, we really do data and software engineering. And then within accounting and finance, we really do more senior level accounting and finance, usually anything from 80 to 400,000 a year. The business is doing incredibly well. We've got a lot of repeat customers. We recently brought contract in-house, and our team is really starting to come together. It's a lean and mean group of folks, and we're having fun, and I'm really happy with where it's at.
Awesome. So some of the things I actually want to talk with you today about is like the journey of a recruiter, the different types of recruitment vehicles. Let's just start off with, the journey of a recruiter in 2023. I know there's a lot of options out there, but what do you see like recruiters going through? Let's talk about that.
The journey of a recruiter as it relates to 2023, because as you know, the journey of a recruiter is never ending, right? So it's crazy. I'm 12 years in, and I feel like I'm constantly learning, constantly humbled, and just blown away by this industry, But I think what's going on in 2023 is recruiters are trying to embrace technology and automation, but still trying to stick to the basics of, recruiting fundamentals, interview questions, interview preps, interview debriefs. How do I work the recruiting mechanics and those fundamentals while still embracing the latest technology? That could be AI, Chat GPT. How do I get into that? What automation tools can I use? So I think what you're seeing right now, there's a fundamental shift in recruiting where people are trying all these tools and technologies, and they've got crazy shiny light bulb syndrome, and they're trying to marry, how do I embrace this and use this, but how do I, still stay productive and actually produce results, right?
I mean, shiny object syndrome, that's a thing that I think everybody goes through.
Totally. Yep.
But
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It is crazy. Like, I talk about this a lot with the people on my team, but you've got cat memes coming at you. You've got your email going all day. You've got automations. And how do you embrace all these things, but then stay focused on picking up the phone, right? And doing interviews, doing handoffs to customers, prepping, debriefing. And how do you marry all those things, stay sane, and, not go down a rabbit hole with technology and tools, And I think a lot of recruiters are struggling about that. I would say the other thing in 2023 is a lot of recruiters are kind of, I think, focusing on their mindset and their confidence level because of the turbulent environment that everybody's gone through. Between late 2019, 2020, 2021 was bonkers, 22 bonkers, 23 is a little bit weird right now. So I think there's a lot of confidence and adaptability and technology. So a recruiter right now is going through a lot.
Now, when one of the things I love that you actually talk about, I've seen you talk about this on social media, a little bit of old school and new school remix.
Yes. Yeah,
what does that mean?
So you come from a large shop background too. That's one thing I like, Ben. But I don't know if did you ever read Peter Lefkowitz, some of his recruiting books and tools, kind of like the old school 80s and 90s recruiting? You ever?
I haven't read his stuff, but I got some Finkel books.
Okay, cool. So I think of old school recruiting as I pick up the phone, I dial the main line at the office, and I ask for somebody, and then I ask that person to transfer to somebody on the line. I pick up the phone and I get it done, right? An old school recruiter even waits at the bottom of the elevator or tries to sneak past the receptionist and does, sneaky things to get recruiting done, right? And I think of old school recruiting as, I got to hit my 10 interviews a week. I've got to do 3 sales presentations a week. Here are my metrics. Here's my fundamentals over time. And I'm going to hit them the old school way, the old school handshake, right? The take you out to lunch, the walk you into the customer after you start with donuts, right? Get everybody in the office donuts. That's all old school. Let me drop off some cookies, right? I think of new school recruiting as how do I embrace automation, AI recommendations, intelligent content with ChatGPT? How do I stay cutting edge so I can ride the Mustang instead of the horse? But how do I still have a service with personalization, that with old school touch that the industry so desperately wants and needs, right? How do I marry those two concepts?
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that because customers are, they're wanting something different, not just whoever's emailing them first.
I like to say, the customer's sick of being dripped on, the customer knows they're in a drip campaign, they know. So, there's a serious hunger for real relationships right now. And just being a real relationship person right now gives you a competitive advantage. One of the things I say on the team is just basic business communication and a basic partnership is like a differentiator now.
Yeah, that's so true on that. And definitely going into what could be weird or turbulent times, that's what helps you keep your customers.
100%. Yep.
Well, so another question I wanted to ask you is you've seen the wonderful world of recruiting from different angles. What are the different types of recruitment vehicles out there? And can you explain them?
There's a ton of them, and a lot of people have a lot of creative mousetraps, but I'll do my best to answer that shortly and in buckets. I like to think of your big shop brick and mortar staffing agency. Those are going to be your Robert Halfs, your K-Forces, your Aerotechs, your All About Peoples, right? These are typically, you come in with a draw or a base, and if you've got the base, you make 10%. If you got the draw, you make 50% commissions, okay? And, you go into an office in a local city and you work that territory in that city, and these companies are like mega conglomerates that open up offices in every major city, and then they have like a big location where they have a shared service center and all their back office staff supporting all their different locations. These companies are masters of what they do. I mean, they've been building the playbook for 20 years, right? And there's thousands of these recruiters out there in these corporate machines, and they work, right? They work incredibly well. They've got good brand recognition, okay? I think that I'm going to stick to more of the agency side. Well, I think the next step is you're starting to see a lot of agencies that are more appealing to independent recruiters, right? And there's a drive for people to say, I don't want the 50%. I'm just going to start my own business, right? So you're seeing just left and right, everyone's a recruiting entrepreneur. Why am I giving 50% to this mega conglomerate when I can literally just send an invoice myself with QuickBooks and make 100%, right? So you're seeing thousands and thousands of independent recruiters go be solopreneurs, right? I don't think anyone goes into us being a solopreneur wanting to be a solopreneur, but 90% stay that way. So there's a lot of I call those the solo recruiters, independents. There's a lot of those folks, but then there's the big corporate, machine type people. Well, in between, there's a lot in between those things on the agency side. Like the one that I stumbled into for a while was a Tima Solutions Group. They were a model that had 200 independent recruiters bolted underneath one virtual hood with a virtual shared service platform. I ended up there for 3 years. Good experience before leaving and starting Frederick Fox. And I'll condense this, sorry, but and typically in these independent contractor models, they function as real estate brokerage companies, right? Where everybody's making 80%, but they're receiving marketing, training, onboarding systems, shared service support. And then you've got in between those independent virtual platforms, you've got your Stanford Roses, you've got, MRI Network, all these like franchisee models as well. So, I think where you're seeing all these models is the independent with 3 buddies that broke off K-Force that now have less than 10 people on the team, and they're trying to get other 50% recent grads to work for them, those little small companies. Then you've got the MRIs, the Stanford Roses, the split networks in between, and then you just got your corporate conglomerates. Long answer to your question, but that's what I'm seeing out there.
Okay. And I know I've seen people successful in many different things, but, and I know also, can you explain what Frederick Fox is doing? Yeah,
so we're a spinoff of the Tima model in the sense that we have a program where you start at 80% commissions as an independent contractor, and you can scale to 100% commissions. We do that through our partner program, where you move initially to 90% commissions, and then you can move to 100% commissions. But very much like Tima, we're a virtual platform with a shared service center. Okay, we have a controller that does contract staffing. We have insurance that we provide. We do billing, collections, payroll. The back office is, I always say, not all smoke and mirrors. It's actually complicated once you have a multi-million-dollar business. But where we're different than Tima is we give our partners actual equity in their business units that they build. Okay, and they earn 50% profit sharing on the people underneath of them, as well as they own 50% of the net income in that P&L. So in the event of a sale, our partners actually own the net income and the profit sharing that they've created. That's different than anything that we've seen out there. Atima has zero equity for their partners. Essentially, everyone there is an independent contractor with zero equity, making one person with 90% ownership of the business, because he gives senior partners 10%. But they're in that model, you're really just an independent contractor building one person's business. In our business model, our partners are building their own business within our umbrella, if that makes sense. Happy to dig into it more, but few things versus Tima. We have 1/3 the shared costs, 1/3 the general administrative costs per member. We pay 5 times the profit sharing, and we're just run very operationally smooth with equity ties and a lot more, I would say, value creation for somebody that wants to build a business.
I think that's great. And 2 points on that I think is interesting. One, it's your team's actually getting equity. My wife spent years helping build a kind of like a data science staffing company and training company. It got sold.
Yeah.
Zero equity. All those years of work.
Yeah, I mean that's what you get at like the big corporate conglomerates, right? Build a team in let's say Phoenix, Arizona, and we'll give you a P&L, but we're only going to give you a 10% profit sharing bonus. We're just giving you a 10% bonus on your team, but you don't own anything. So the reason why that matters is that if the owner sells the business and gets a 10x multiple or a 6x multiple, you don't participate in any of that. In our model, you do. That is it's like you're building somebody else's value and equity, but all you're receiving in return is a bonus in these big shops. And I think I think the main reason people want to go independent, especially in our generation, is they want to feel like they can leave something to their kids, or they own something, or they're leaving a legacy, or they're working not just for somebody else, they're working for themselves. And so our model, we always say it's the closest thing to communism that we could possibly build while still being a business and profitable. And, that's our model, and we're running with it.
I absolutely love it. And for some of the agency recruiters out there, I was at a big box for a while, loved it, blew my mind, had such fun there. But I think what kind of woke me up one day is when, I think my gross profit margin was something like $650,000 for the year. And I think I made like $60K.
Yeah, you and me both, brother. Take him for a ride.
And I was like, wait, where'd all this money go?
Someone on my team, Rob Thomas, he's one of our partners. He always says, you see how much your gross profit is and then how much you take home. And once you see those things clearly and the light bulb goes on, once you see that, you never unsee it,
And that year that was like that 650 gross margin profit, I opened up an account that I signed, sealed, did everything with it, and then they took it away from my territory. And that one account brought in, I think it was something like $1.7 million in revenue that year that I didn't even have access to anymore. I was just like, I'm done.
It happened to me too. I always say, here comes the national account manager, right? As soon as you get a cut, here he or she comes, right? We're going to roll this out nationally, and all of a sudden all your commissions is gone, right? I always say, they're basically these national accounts people. They're trying to feed on your customers, and then they're trying to get multiple points of contact within the same customer, basically to make you expendable. So if you leave, they retain the customer. It's a good business strategy.
And I think for me, that was like one of my wake up calls.
Totally.
Well, let me ask you another question.
Sure.
Your search firm, you guys are constantly bringing on onboarding recruiters. A lot of the listeners are also looking for recruiters on their team. What makes a good recruiting hire, and what do you look for?
That's a good question. I really look for coachability and humbleness. I feel like the best recruiters know they're climbing a hill and they know where they're at on the hill. I think it can be painful because every recruiter, usually the not so good recruiters, have the biggest egos, and they always think that they're number one. I have a joke where I say every recruiter thinks they're the best recruiter alive until they actually get like in an agency and realize they're not that good. And that sounds a little, but I prefer the people that are humble and honest and transparent when you're interviewing a recruiter. Like, I always say this, like, be honest with me. Where are you at? Are you a salesperson? Are you a delivery person? I'm going to know 90 days in when you join, and I'm going to know your technical chops. I'm going to know how many customer relationships you have. I'm going to know if you're telling me you do 15 candidates a week, I'll know in 90 days that you can really only do 5 or 6 a week. I would prefer you just be honest with me up front so that I know what I'm getting into. And I would rather someone be honest, coachable, and tell me where they're at, because if they've come to grips with the reality of their skill set, then I can help get them to the next level without their ego getting in the way.
Awesome. Great stuff to look for. So one of the things I actually was super excited about bringing you on is talking about the journey from 0 to, or 100,000 to a million, and from 1 to 5 million. Let's focus on the first part of that. Talk about the journey that a recruiter has to go through from 100,000 to a million.
Yeah, and I'm going to go based off of like billings, right? A million in billings, because a lot of recruiters are a little sneaky about a million. Like, it's really their top line contract and consulting revenue, right? And then you find out their gross margin's really 200,000, right? I'm talking about gross margin 1 million. How do you go from 0 to 1 million? For me, it's really taken 12 years. I've heard of other people that just come out swinging, and they jumped into nursing staffing in 2020, and they're just their second year in nursing staffing, they built $1 million. That was not my journey and path. I had to go through a lot of freaking pain just even to break 200 grand. So I'll tell you, my first 3 years in the business, this is working for a big shop. I only billed 120 grand, then 150, then 175. And I'd always been good at everything that I've done, sports, and recruiting really humbled me. Why couldn't I become a big biller? Don't you know when you join a big shop, they're like, everybody makes 6 figures here. And then you get in and you realize, wait a second, there's only like one person. Everybody's making 50, 60K, and so for me, it was, I had to go through those first 3 years of like a lot of pain, a lot of learning. I constantly tried to skip corners. I think when I really started to break through in year 4 and year 5 is when I kind of got up to being a 300 to 500K biller. That required a lot of consistency. That required building a book of business that was repeatable. I was only doing Phoenix at the time in year 4 and 5. So I had built by then, after 3 years, like an actual book of business that was repeatable and sustainable and referrals. And so the other side of that too was working for a big shop as a 500K biller, I had a lot of like delivery support that they were investing into. And so when you have, people working really hard, delivering for your customers, it's a lot easier to bill 500K. When I jumped out of that and I went more independent in 2017, I actually went back from being a 500K biller back to only being like a 200K biller again, being independent, because I had to relearn how to bill at a high level as an independent. It's a lot different when you're selling a brand that no one's ever heard of, and you don't have delivery support. You don't have the big corporate conglomerate and machine. You don't have leads calling in. You never work. You know what I mean? And So when you're stripped to your bare bones, I always say I really learned who I was. I thought I was this big biller, but then when you stripped me of all the corporate machine, I was really only like a 250, 270K biller. I couldn't really do much more than that. So that was around 2017 that I went independent. I didn't really get to the $1 million mark, which is this year, really on track for it, and towards the end of last year too. That's been a process and a journey. And there's a lot of levels. I initially started as a full desk up to 600, and to get this, to get to 600,000, that's when you have to really have a routine. You have to wake up early. You have to put in 8, 9, 10 hours a day. You have to calendar block. You have to be on your game. Okay, 600K is on your freaking game, and you've got to hold yourself accountable every single week to very high metrics, and you have to control your inputs over time. But it's all about consistency at 600K. Rhythm, routine, and consistency, and you can get to 600K. 600 to a million for me has been, what systems do I have in place? It's been getting fully on the sales side. It's been getting delivery support recruiters, mushrooming out customers, getting repeat business, and building a delivery arm underneath me so that I can continue to sell.
Awesome. That's great. So do you mind if you share like what you think like a successful recruiter and their KPIs should look like to be a big biller?
Yeah, it depends on if you're on the sales side, the recruiting side, or full desk. Do you prefer I start with any of those, or?
Let's start with full desk.
Okay, in my opinion, to successfully run a desk, if you want to be, I'll just give you my numbers at 600K. I averaged 9.8 handoffs a week, and then I did 3 client presentations a week every single week.
Awesome.
And that's the key. That's the key. It's not I do it one week and then I fall off a cliff next week, or I get COVID one week. So in that example, it's, okay, I do 9, I get COVID and I don't do anything the next week. Well, now I have to do 18 when I come back if I want to stay. So it's all about consistency over time.
Great numbers, great advice. And to be a successful just on the recruiting side of the house, like what kind of numbers should you be hitting?
I think as a pure recruiter, just a pure recruiter, you don't do any sales interactions. I think that you have to, if you want to do 600K, I think you have to crank. I think that you have to say, this is a numbers game, and I'm going to play the numbers. I don't fall in love with candidates. I don't do 30-minute interviews. I control the process, and I send 15 candidates a week. That's 3 a day. I've got good candidate control. I don't fall in love with them anymore. I'm able to separate myself emotionally. And so it's a balance of you got to be transactional but you can be professional and transactional at the same time, right? I think where some recruiters struggle is that they get too emotionally tied to these candidates and they just start to suck your soul. You got to be careful with that. And I think the best recruiters know how to package that up and run the numbers.
Awesome. Great advice. Now, kind of switching to talking about scaling a firm. What's it
okay.
like, and what are the things that you have to do to scale a firm from that 1 million to that 5 million mark?
It's incredibly difficult. I think a lot of people think, okay, me and my buddies at this big shop are going to start this firm and we're going to sell for 20 million down the road, right? Everybody goes into it with those intentions, but then when the rubber meets the road, you realize this is a huge hill to climb. That it's not all smoke and mirrors, right? And there's a reason why, very few businesses are successful and why the industry's consolidated so much, right? It's a tough road, but for me, like if I were to give people advice on the 0 to 5 million, 0 to 1 million, I call it spaghetti. Okay. Spaghetti is, you got to get revenues. Revenues. From 0 to 1 million, you need customers and you need money coming in the door. Okay. You need customers and revenue. And that gets your brand up. It gets your customer list up. Even if you're losing money to get revenue, you need to get revenue to 1 million. Okay. 1 to 2 million, I think, is spaghetti and meatballs. Okay. So what is meatballs? I think of meatballs as costs. Okay. So 0 to 1 million, I got to get revenues. 1 to 2 million, I need to understand what are my actual expenses and my costs for running my business, and am I even profitable? Okay. And 2 to 3 million is all about processes. It's about infrastructure and starting to set up leadership structures within your business. Okay. 3 to 5 million, you've got revenues, you've got a growing customer base, you're getting better at cost control, you've got infrastructure, and you're just starting to do leadership. But in that 3 to 5 million mark, you really got to focus on training and onboarding. I think a lot of people underestimate training and onboarding. You have to have learning management systems. You have to have processes in your business. You have to have automation, and you have to have niche control. I know I don't know much about 5 to 10 million, but I have learned that from 0 to 5 million.
You've actually hit something that I've had a few guests on, people like that 5, 10, 15, 20 million mark and above. So much of it, everybody talks about the importance of onboarding and training. And that's something I feel like, most recruiters never got started in the industry properly with.
Yeah, you hit something huge. I mean, onboarding and training, you can never assume that another recruiter knows what they're doing. And that sounds terrible to say that. Unless you hire somebody that's out of like Robert Half or K-Force, and they just went through these really great training programs. If you hire outside of that, you literally cannot assume that anyone has the raw fundamentals of the business. So in hiring people, you realize each person brings something unique to the table, but you realize that you need to have fundamental recruiting training. You need to have sales training, recruiting training, systems and process training within your ATS and CRM and how you log things. And when you actually build out your full training curriculum, or you call it a university or whatever you call it, it's a daunting project.
And like I said, it's the firms that have been high revenue firms. It's something that it surprises me in the interview. It was like that becomes one of the important things for their success.
Yeah, because a lot of like really good sales leaders and like the best salespeople are not very good at training and onboarding, right? You ever work with like $1 million biller and they're like, pick up the phone, just pick up the phone. It's like, well, I can't just pick up the phone. How do you pick up the phone? What do you say? Like, how did you even get the phone call? How did you know who to call? And so I think when you become a business owner, you really realize like, wait a second, I've really got to break this down to have repeatable sales. I know that sales are going to come in with this process or these processes, and I know recruiting is going to happen with these processes, and I can predict my revenue over time based off my probabilities. And then it's a matter of just getting people to move within those systems, right? And care about the systems and have them help create those systems, because they should be, it's not just appeasing the owner, they should want to do it because they'll then be more successful. I think that's also part of the recipe.
Awesome. I'm going to switch gears into like a little bit of a tactical advice, like real advice out there that people can actually implement. What are some of the best ways to getting clients in 2023?
Do you still run a agency desk, Ben? I'm curious.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay. It's been a funky year in 2023. One of the things I like to say is fish where the fish are. And there's a guy, James, on my team. He's notorious for saying fish where the fish are, right? Technology has been in the gutter, okay? Software engineering, product management, it's been in the gutter since August 2022, right? It went off a cliff. It died. It's maybe starting to come back right now in March. I think what you have to do is know, okay, call a spade a spade. I'm a software engineering recruiter. I need to adapt, okay? I need to become an accounting and finance or a legal recruiter, right? Because accounting and finance is incredibly hot. Legal is incredibly hot. Sales and ops is incredibly hot. Anything like data for business finance decisions is super hot. I don't know much about clinical or that type of staffing, but I think what a recruiter needs to do is say, what industries are hot? Where are the investments going? I need to go after that, and I need to adapt out of my singular niche that is busted right now, and I need to go where the fish are, okay? The other thing I say is the MPC. I'm a big fan of that. Marketing candidates. The more specific to the more relevant target on the MPC, the better the response. And I think there's a lot to be done around creative personalization at scale. Happy to dig into that if you are curious.
Yeah, no, I actually go into that.
Okay, so creative personalization at scale is a concept. I don't want to give away all of our tips and tricks, but besides just the MPC that everybody uses, you do the MPC, right?
Every now and then, I'm in GovCon, so it's a whole different world. But
so besides the marketing, the hot candidate of the week, which still works like wildfire. The personalization at scale is a technique where you pick something very random, like pickleball. And you look on LinkedIn and you say, I'm going to target chief technology officers that mention pickleball in their LinkedIn. And then you hit them with an email that says, staffing feels like pickleball when you're down in the fourth quarter. Okay. And you're doing something creative at scale to CTOs that play pickleball. Okay. If you start to think about that concept and you say, well, what about marketing to CTOs named Ben as Ben the recruiter, and you can start to spin personalization at scale. Here's another example. I'm looking for CTOs that graduated from Baylor University, and I'm going to send an email to them telling them about the new business administration update at the Baylor University. And then I'm going to somehow spin that to staffing solutions. So I'm grabbing their attention through personalization at scale. The weirder and more creative you are, the better the response rate can be.
I absolutely love that. I mean, it's even as recruiters and staffing firm owners, we get hit by so many marketing messages. How do you be different? And Will, I think you just nailed it on the head. One of the ways to absolutely be different in 2023, because as you said earlier, everybody knows they're in a drip campaign.
Yes.
All right. So, switching gears a little bit more to more tactical advice. It's 2023. It's 2023. There's a brand new recruiter listening to this podcast, just starting off in the industry. What advice would you give to them to become successful?
Ooh, I couldn't imagine starting over. Could you? Here's what I would say. I would say follow the biggest biller and follow the person that bears fruit. There are a lot of recruiters out there at agencies that putt around the office. They talk a big game, but they're really mediocre and they're average. Okay. What I would say is study the big biller, ask them questions, soak as much as you can. Listen to how they're on the phone. Ask them how they get leads. What are their metrics? What do they hold themselves accountable to? I think the best thing you can do as a new person is identify the biggest biller, whether you like them or not, and just set your ego aside and learn and soak it up.
I love that because that's actually what I did at Aerotech. And I don't think I've really mentioned this story on this podcast, but they pulled me aside. I think it was 2-3 months in. They're just like, hey, we're going to fire you. You suck. You absolutely suck at recruiting. And I was just I kind of went home and sulked. And then the next day, this is before LinkedIn was so new, barely anybody was using it. So you couldn't just hop online and find people. So I looked at the Aerotech's leading, top producers in every industry. And I just started cold calling everybody hey, you got time after work? Can we chat? And literally just cold call, talk, and tried emulating what they were doing. And it took me to being one of the top producers in my division at Aerotech. But it was just you hit the nail on the head. That was kind of what I did.
Yeah. It's because you're smart and you're coachable and you're adaptable and you weren't going to let your ego get in your way, right? It's amazing. Tiger Woods has a golf coach, right? Obviously now because he's struggling, but even at his prime, he had a coach. And so you should always be seeking mentors and coaches and learning and asking questions. That is the smart thing to do. Me being a $5 million business, I regularly talk to a guy that owns a $30 million business and another guy that owns a $60 million business and another guy that owns a $100 million business. I have recurring calls with them. And I say, what are you doing? How did you do that? Walk me through it. Like, you can always be climbing the hill and learning from somebody else that is further down the path.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask the same question, but for experienced recruiters. What advice would you give experienced recruiters to be successful in the recruiting game?
It depends on the experienced recruiter. I think what I would say is that you got to learn how to learn again. A lot of really experienced recruiters that maybe they missed the technology wave and they're still trying to stay relevant. They have to learn how to learn again. They were really good in the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s. The second automation came on the scene in 2015. They started to become less relevant. So I think there's a lot of super experienced recruiters that like talk about the yellow page days and the days of glory, but they really haven't been relevant for 5-6 years. They got to learn how to learn again.
That's great advice. Definitely in a world that's constantly changing. All right. So again, the next few questions I have are questions I just absolutely love, like asking every guest. Is there a book that has had a huge impact on your career?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the books that I always, of course I read a lot of sales books, like Brian Tracy, I've read a lot of him, but like The Psychology of Selling, but that's like a must read. But there's a book that I think that it actually had the best impact on my career, and it was Don't Feed the Monkey Mind by Jennifer Shannon. So.
Okay. Why?
A lot of what it's actually not a recruiting book. It's actually a book about anxiety and fear. And after I read that book, it had the biggest impact on my career because it gives you coping mechanisms for tackling your anxiety and your fear. And I'm an anxious person. I got my mother's genes on that. My father has zero. He doesn't have an anxious bone in his body. But I've dealt with a lot of anxiety and fear, and my success has been hindered by my own anxiety and fear. And when I read this book, it opened up me having coping mechanisms and being able to master and control my anxiety and fear allowed me to go bigger in my life, allowed me to go bigger in my career, allowed me to take on things that I would have been too scared to do before or didn't have the confidence for.
I'll definitely check out that book. I think, it's one of the things that, we talk about in the recruiting industry constantly is, fear holds a lot of people back from like being the best recruiter that they could possibly be and living the best life that they could possibly live.
A lot of, and I'll just give you the Cliff Note answer, but a lot of what it talks about is that the more you face your fears and put yourself in uncomfortable situations, the more your anxiety, it shrinks every single time. And that by facing your fears constantly, the next time around, you'll be a little bit less anxious, right? And it talks a lot about knowing when the monkey mind is causing anxiety and fear and being able to separate your mind from your worst enemy, which is oftentimes your mind. Like, I'll give you an example. I went to New York City about 2 weeks ago, and I had the next day 4 back-to-back meetings in Manhattan, and then I had a dinner scheduled with a private equity group in a business that we were supporting. The night before, I couldn't sleep, okay? I'm playing through my head how I'm going to go through each meeting, right? And I had anxiety and I couldn't sleep, right? And that impacts your performance when you're scared, you're fearful, you're overthinking, right? Instead of just being yourself. And so, but the moral of the story is, even though I ended up getting 3 hours of sleep that night, okay, all the meetings ended up going well. And every meeting that I got to, I thought, why am I nervous? This is really easy. This is going great. And so the point I'm trying to make is, the more you do those really uncomfortable things, next time you go to New York, you might get 4 hours of sleep instead of 3.
Well, I hope next time you get 6 hours of sleep for that next
Thanks.
camp.
Appreciate it.
I love that. So on the same note, is there a quote that you absolutely love or has had an impact on your career?
Okay, I get made fun of a lot in our agency at Frederick Fox because I constantly bring this quote and image up. I'm like a complete sucker for it. I actually want to get it like blown up on my wall. I don't have it, but it's about the eagle flying. I don't know if you've seen it, but it basically says, when a storm is coming, all other birds seek shelter. The eagle alone avoids the storm by flying above it. And I love that quote because a lot of times recruiters, it's like they know that if you know that the recession is coming and we're not going to avoid it, you've got two options: seek shelter and hide, or go full speed into that sucker and rise above it, right? And one of the things I always say, a recession is coming, you might as well go full speed into that sucker.
Well, let me ask you a tactical question. Talking about recessions, we've been through a few.
Yes.
What's your advice for a recruiter that hasn't gone through one yet? How do you get through one?
My biggest lesson has been adaptability. You have to adapt and you have to be creative and you have to keep moving, right? And what happens to recruiters in a recession is they freeze. And they're negative and they're online talking about drinking wine and how stressful recruiting is. If you do that, you're dead in the water. When a recession comes, I'll give you an example. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, I had just started my business the year before, and there was a guy that wanted to go into partnership with me, scaled up to 10 million in 2020, and I had only done like 200 grand during the pandemic. And I said to him, I was like, how are you doing 20 million in 2020? I'm like frozen over here. And he said, well, as soon as the COVID came out, I started targeting laboratory businesses that did COVID tests, and they were staffing up like crazy. I got 300 contractors out at laboratory sites that tested for COVID. And so that's the difference in a recession is, are you frozen and freezing and crying yourself to sleep? Or are you saying, who's out there making money? What's going on right now that I can latch onto and support? And I'm going to adapt. I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. I'm going to stop being frozen, and I'm going to adapt, and I'm going to find the business.
Awesome. I love that. Well, Will, really just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you'd love to share with the listeners?
No, I appreciate being on this, Ben. I look up to you in the industry. You've got a great podcast. I appreciate you giving me the airtime. If anyone listening is interested in the Frederick Fox model and what we're doing, I'd love to speak with them and peel back the onion more on what we're doing. We're looking to add people. And so thanks for listening, and have a good rest of your Friday, Ben. All right.
All right. Sounds good. And for the listeners, until next time, guys.